Hello, sportsmen. Well, here we are. It's still March, sloppy March. What is there to do? There's one activity that's always big in our guide report at this time of year, and that's steelhead fishing. There is steelhead fishing that goes on in many of the rivers around the state, and an especially interesting feature that John Ford shot a couple years ago was up at the Bear River near Harbor Springs, Petoskey. We're going to show you that, plus we have a turkey video and more. Stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost. You're watching The Practical Sportsman. The gobble of a wild turkey is exciting by itself, but to see a big tom turkey up close when it's displaying and gobbling, oh man, that's a real treat. Dr. Errol Heitman from West Olive grabbed his home video recorder when he spotted this big tom in the woods behind his house. Now this was on a Sunday morning, the third week in March. Tom turkeys puff up their feathers and strut. They're trying to attract hens in March. See, this is the breeding season. They display, they gobble. When they're excited, their heads and necks turn bright red and bright blue. Those are the colors of a big breeding tom. It's really cool to see the steam backlit in the sunlight shoot out when that big boy gobbles. Watch this. Dr. Heitman doesn't pretend to be a turkey calling champ, especially when he's trying to roll video at the same time, but turkeys are easily fooled by turkey calls, especially early in the breeding season. That pattern of calling isn't exactly what they teach in the seminars, but it strikes a response with a hot gobbler. Sometimes getting a gobbler to answer seems all too easy. It's that time of year, people thinking of turkey hunting. Mm-hmm. So we gave those turkey hunters a little boost right there.
A little primer, a little primer.
Yep. Now what about the steelhead fishermen? Are you going to do anything for the steelhead fishermen, John? People look to this show to get psyched up, and I did that essay last week on the splendor of March.
Yeah, that wasn't a real big psych up, but maybe it was a reality check.
It's a reality check.
No, we were going to do some steelhead fishing in Petoskey, and that's a little something you can do this time of year.
Upstream, it looks like a picturesque river flowing through a small town, and it is. It's the Bear River spilling out into Little Traverse Bay at Petoskey. Just before the river goes under the last highway bridge, there's a spillway. In April and May, below this spillway, anglers congregate because that's where the steelhead trout congregate on their spring spawning run. Now, most fishermen either stand on this bridge or they fish along banks downstream from the spillway. But some anglers, not too many, don't mind fishing the fast water below the spillway from the concrete shoreline that's a fair distance from the water. Now there's three fellows here, one with a steelhead on, the other two, they're going to work as a team to land that fish, presuming, of course, that the fish doesn't break the line before it's netted. Now, you can't fish water like this in the traditional way, especially from a break wall. You have to keep the rod tip down because you want the fish's head to stay down. And you hope that it faces into the current instead of drifting downstream with that tremendous flow of water. But the strategy worked. The netter on his belly has done his job. He hands the net handle to the other guy, who lifts it up over the railing, and the lucky angler got his steelhead. But he couldn't have done it without a good netting team.
Second one.
This is a male steelhead, darkly colored, but with a characteristic rainbow down its side. This water is not easy water to fish, but most anglers stay downstream a little ways. Ones who fish the bridge know they have to leave the bridge and walk along the bank to net their trophies. Now, Louis Malik from Petoskey is one of those bridge fishermen.
Fun. Sure. I'll try to hold him right in this pool here. Ah, he's gone.
Well, steelhead anglers don't mind losing fish. You know, in fact, they lose a lot more than they catch. That's just the way it is when you fish for big fish in fast-moving water like this. Lines break, you tie on more hooks, more sinkers. It's a constant process. And I have to be honest, it drives me nuts. But steelhead fishermen have to be among the most persistent, most patient, most dedicated anglers in the world. If they're not losing their hooks and rigs in the rocks and underwater wood piles, they're catching fish that have to be released for one reason or another. This fellow has a nice little steelhead on, but he doesn't want little steelhead. This is the ideal way to release a fish. Take the hook out while it's still in the water, let it swim away untouched.
I'll get you started anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's the second one I got like that.
Oh, is it?
I had another one down here, about 13 pounds, a big female, and she fell off just like I was going to take her towards the beach.
I might as well tell you this is not a typical day of steelhead fishing. The trout are biting like crazy. Everybody's hooking fish. But it's only the skilled anglers or the ones with good help on the net who are landing them. David Lloyd from Onaway is one of those young, nimble, skilled steelheaders.
You getting tired of this yet? Oh no. I enjoy this. It's a way to spend a day off. Nice female. There he goes.
Dave heads down the rocks. Not an easy way to go, especially at the speeds you sometimes have to travel to keep up with these fish. Dave has no net, and he looks around for help, but nobody is there. So what happens? The fish gets in the current and snaps the line. But Dave Lloyd isn't upset. He's used to this. That's steelhead fishing. Now, what are these anglers using for bait? Well, not spoons or spinners. They're all using rather small hooks tied into spawn bags. Now, this is actually steelhead spawn in a little mesh sack that attracts the steelhead to strike. Now, it can be cold in the spring. Many fishermen use woolen gloves with the fingers cut off for tying knots. Up about 2 feet from the hook is a sinker like this, or maybe split shot, to keep the bait near the bottom, which is where the steelhead lie. Now, the bait doesn't have to be real either.
All I'm using is just a little single wireless pom-pom that kind of imitates a single egg, and so when I'm floating it down, fish thinks it's an egg and wants to have something to eat and grabs it, and I hopefully have something to eat.
Show them the technique now. Show them how you do it anyway.
What I do is I just take it up and float it in that white water there, and a lot of times the fish are laying right down in the low, so you kind of put some weight on there, try to get below the thing, and every once in a while you get snagged up on the rocks.
That would have been pretty good if you would have done that on cue.
That would have been real good.
You know, I have to admire these steelheaders who take constant snagging in the rocks in stride. Now, that would drive me buggy. But like I said, steelhead fishermen are patient because they usually get a lot of strikes and have a lot of chances of catching rather large fish, anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds. The young ones like Dave, they risk their ankles and legs on these rocks. Now, he's on his own, he grabs a net, and the footing is precarious to say the least. Sets the net down again. Now, he's not sure when that steelhead will come in close to be netted. Maybe now. No, maybe not. Well, now the fishing is getting a little tired. Doesn't want to battle the current, so it lets itself drift downstream. And if Dave doesn't want to break the line, he has to follow it down through the rocks and around the snags. A well-intentioned but not extremely adept netter tries to help and almost loses the fish. Now watch Dave's two-handed technique on the rod. Now that's a sign of experience. He wants maximum rod control at a time when the fish is in charge. Two hands manipulating the rod up and down to follow the fish's movements, that keeps pressure on the fish solidly, but not too tight. More fish are lost at the net than any other place. The fish shies away, or the net actually knocks the hook out of its mouth. One of those things happened here in the swift water, but Dave Lloyd takes it in stride and jumps back to get in the action. On the bridge, another angler has one hooked. turns out to be Louis Malik, once again, a local from Petoskey. He lost a steelhead earlier, but now he's got another one on. And who has put his rod down to pick up a net to help a fellow angler? None other than Dave Lloyd. This guy's a real sportsman. Now, he knows that he can net the fish better than many of these fellas. He's learned the technique, he's quick, his eyes and reflexes are good, and he knows fish behavior. So Dave waits and makes his move, and Louis Malik becomes a successful steelheader at last. Now, I don't think these two know each other, but they're brothers of the fishing fraternity.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
That's called camaraderie.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, finally caught something.
Is that your first one today?
Huh?
Is that your first one?
First one I caught, yeah.
Well, I saw you lose a couple.
That's a fresh one, too, Lou. That's a nice fish. Beautiful, isn't it?
Fantastic.
John Ford is having a great time behind the camera. He's chatting with fishermen, getting their trials and tribulations on tape. Now, this guy isn't sure what he's up against.
Get down below the rapids, it's all over.
Well, this steelhead is a nice one and is apparently running out of gas fighting the current under the bridge, so it relaxes and drifts downstream. But look who's on the net. It's our young, experienced, quick-handed David Lloyd. Well, he can goof up a netting job just like anybody else, especially when the conditions are rough. But to Dave, fishing can be fun whether you're on the end of the rod or on the end of the net. And it's all critical. It all takes skill, and a little luck now and then never hurts either. Now, see how the angler is paying out line, letting it slacken up a bit? He wants the fish to move over across the river to a slower pool, and by giving the fish line, that fish is likely to turn its head towards the current and move into that pool, which is what it does. Now let's see if after all this work, they'll land the fish, or it'll break off like so often happens.
That's cool. Yeah, that was a heck of a net job there, partner. Thank you. That's a heck of a net job. It's caught well.
Well, Dave has helped a number of anglers land their fish, and you'd think his turn is coming up soon. Now, let's see if this net man does the job, or if Dave loses another one to that fast current and jagged rocks. Yes, the fish is in the net, but there's a slight problem to an angler like Dave who follows the rules, and that is this fish wasn't legally hooked.
What does that make? That makes the second one, but he's hooked foul, so we gotta get him back.
John Ford said this wasn't just grandstanding for the camera either.
Right in the fence.
Now, these anglers weren't snagging. They were good sportsmen, and this steelhead went back. Keeping a fish that's foul-hooked can get you some healthy fines from conservation officers, and while you will see fishermen who keep foul-hooked fish, you'll also see some of them ticketed right on the river.
Oh, well, maybe next time. Maybe next time.
Now, that might look easy, But to any of you who are my age or older, know that boulder jumping and rock running is an art in itself, requiring agility, balance, stamina. But this is what you have to do to catch steelhead in rivers like this. And I've got to admit, it's a little too much for me. This kind of steelheading is more of a spectator sport to watch, something the young guys find challenging and worthwhile. Now, you can see a net chasing Dave down the bank. Somebody's trying to be helpful. But to be a net man in a situation like this means you've got to crawl over the rocks at breakneck speed and even get in front of the angler if you can, anticipate the fish's moves. And you can see right here, bless his heart for all his good intentions, the net man almost muffs the job and loses a nice steelhead that Dave has worked long and hard to land. Finally, Dave grabs the net and makes the final scoop. There's an angler who deserves this fish, a nice silvery steelhead, fresh from the Great Lakes, hooked fairly, and it'll make some mouth-watering fillets on the grill, which is why so many anglers converge on the Bear River in the spring. Fishing isn't always this good. In fact, this was an extraordinary day that no one predicted. John Ford captured steelheading the hard way, and Dave Lloyd from Onaway finally got the well-deserved prize he was seeking.
If you're in the market for some exciting ice fishing, it doesn't get any more exciting than at this time of year. You can lose your car, your shanty can fall through, you can see your buddies drift off in the distance. It can be very dangerous out there, folks. The ice is breaking up, and there have been many rescues recently, so you're going to want to watch it. But I will give you the guide report. There are fish to be caught. The question you have to consider is it wise to go out there and try to fish for them? So that's the scoop. If you want to do some snow sports, get up north and be careful on that ice. We want to see you back here next week. Have a good one.